love running. I love running.
Yeah, welcome everybody. This is, some of you already know, this is Dr. David Depreler and my desk mate, two, three days a week. We're really lucky to have him come out and share a little bit about his experiences with breathing. That's one of his specialties.
And yeah, I really do want to talk about the pattern work, the philosophy behind it, because I think it'll give you more insights on how to tweak it and why we're actually doing it. So what I'm thinking we'll do today is we'll take a little bit of a cruise through anatomy just to make sure we're kind of all on the same page. And don't worry, it'll be teeny, teeny, teeny. And then we'll talk again about what good breathing is, what runs amok, and more importantly, and a whole lot more fun, what can we do to actually change the course of that. Okay? Anatomy, diaphragm. Where's the diaphragm attached? Everybody show on your body. Yeah, so your diaphragm actually runs all the way around. All right, so it's really this membrane. All right. Below that is our pelvic floor, so we've got these two membranes that oppose each other. Right? Most people have heard by now that pelvic floor is part of core muscle stabilization. Diaphragm is also another really vital component to our core, actually knowing how to be smart and stable as our arms and legs fly around in space. So this diaphragm, just think of it as a pelvic floor upside down. All right, so it's the top and the bottom of this canister. It runs all the way around. Okay? It works by contracting in the center. There's actually a cord that's attached down in our pelvic cavity. As our diaphragm contracts, it descends, which seems kind of counterintuitive. But so that cord contracts and our diaphragm descends down into our pelvic cavity, which is why your belly gently expands. You can expand your belly by using muscles. That's not belly breathing. True belly breathing is just this passive expansion of your belly, so it's very subtle. Same thing with our ribs, although they expand for a different reason. So our lower rib cage expands because of negative pressure created by our diaphragm descending and creating this space in our chest cavity. All right, so optimal breathing is that lower rib cage expands as we take a breath in. And then a breath out is really just the whole show coming back together passively. Okay, let's take a moment to see if we can feel that lower rib expansion. And what we'll do is we'll all turn to the person to your right, which will form a nice tight circle. And we're going to feel, the nice thing about this is you'll get a chance to feel it on somebody else. I'll tell you what, I'm going to step into the center of the circle just so I can instruct. You guys get tight. Sorry, this will be the part where it makes it a little harder to film. Yep, you guys got to come in tighter. We'll let Aaron keep up with us. This is really cozy. I love it. I love it. Okay, and so you can note, once you get your space, this is fantastic. Once you get your space, then you can stop walking. And the nice thing about this is you get a chance to feel it on somebody else, and that person's hands on your lower ribs are also going to be very helpful because it's going to help direct where your breathing goes. So everybody, your tongue rests gently on the roof of your mouth. You're breathing in and out through your nose. Let your breathing be really subtle. We're not looking for a big excursion here. See if you can let go enough in your body that your breath automatically goes into those ribs where you can feel the person's hands behind you on, and you can imagine it on the person in front of you. And so just take a minute and do that breathing. Great, and then let's try and do it to the person behind you. So everyone turns around. Does anybody need a reinstruction? Let's do this. Did anybody have a hard time feeling it on themselves? Did anyone have a hard time feeling like they could get their breathing down low in those back ribs where the hands are? Okay. Did anybody feel it in the person in front of them where they didn't feel like they could feel that movement? If you had a hard time, create just a little bit of a squeeze in. All right, just that little bit of pressure will help you feel it more, and it'll also help them feel that expansion. Not enough that you'll stop the breathing, but just enough that you're really dialed into that. Does that feel like a different pattern for anybody once you actually put a little attention into that space? Yeah. Okay. For those people who it feels different, does it feel okay?
Great.
Right? Okay. It may or may not. If it's a really dramatic change, a lot of times it won't necessarily feel great. If it's a small shift, it'll normally feel good. Okay? But ideally, that is the breathing that's associated with really good breath chemistry. Okay? I'm careful to not say that that's what actually equals bad chemistry, and also that bad chemistry equals breathing that's not there. But we know that they correlate really well. People who keep really good chemistry while they're breathing, breathe in that pattern. All right? We're meant to breathe in our upper chest when we're running away from a mastodon, okay, or getting out of the way of a bus, things like that, where we've got to get air in really fast. But we're not meant to be doing a lot of chest breathing when we're doing most all activity.
Sometimes I have a hard time with the tongue at the top of the mouth. Like, feels like it's so kind of like a lot of tension, just holding it. Like, that's something that I guess go away with time, or.
Yeah. Does anyone else have that same feeling that you started to build tension up with your tongue in the roof of your mouth, like you're trying to drive it through the top of your mouth? Okay. About half the people will, so you're not alone in that. And you're right. You're right to kind of be a little suspicious of that, because it's meant to just rest there and be very small. If you press up hard, you actually trigger a whole different set of reflexes which don't work on our behalf.
It's sort of natural, let it float up.
Yeah, yeah. You can think of it like butter just kind of spreading out on the roof of your mouth instead of drilling a hole through it. Okay, yeah, and no doubt it takes a fair amount of practice. So the common breathing dysfunction in adults who have healthy heart and lungs, which is most of us, is that we tend to overbreathe. The irony is it leaves you with a feeling that you want more air. And that sense of wanting more air, what our body will physiologically do is breathe more, which actually spins the whole thing in the wrong direction. The chemistry behind it, which I'll just hit on really lightly, is the more we breathe off CO2. So we actually drop the CO2 in our blood chemistry. The more our CO2 drops, the more basic our blood is. Hemoglobin has a really small window where it will let go of oxygen. So if we change the pH in a way by instance overbreathing, hemoglobin will hold on to oxygen as it's supposed to, but it won't let it go to the tissue that needs it. So our system is left with the feeling like it needs to breathe more because our brain's not getting oxygen, but the reality is we've got a ton of oxygen in our system. Hemoglobin just won't let go of it because we've adopted a behavior, a belief, a chemistry that's changing our blood pH in a way that hemoglobin won't let go of oxygen. So all this stuff that we're playing with has this central goal of tipping our blood pH in an optimal range. So it's all about getting blood pH into this window where hemoglobin is really happy to let go of oxygen to any of the tissue that needs it, whether it's our brain tissue, our cardiac tissue, our digestive system, our musculoskeletal system. So it's all about getting your bodies more efficient and smarter. We should be able to breathe in a really big bandwidth. So we should be able to be stressed out and anxious and breathe fast and still maintain really good chemistry. We should be able to be in a relaxed, meditative state and have chemistry that still looks like what it does when we're amped up. Now, how we get to that chemistry will be different in each situation, but we're not going to say that we should all be doing deep, mellow breathing all the time in our lives, okay? We want to be able to be amped up and be wild, and we want to be able to be quiet and have our chemistry essentially flatline in a place where hemoglobin will let go of oxygen to whatever tissue needs it. So that's the goal. All right. So hypocapnia, this blowing off CO2, low CO2, is really the common dysfunction. If we bring this into the running world, it's really fascinating what I've seen over the past couple years. And that's that Sidestitch being one of the common reasons I'm pulled in for people with runners with breathing dysfunction. And when we hook them up to a capno trainer, which is this little piece of technology that pulls in air from a cannula and analyzes it in a split second, what we see with people who get side stitches is there's a drop in their CO2 right before they start to get the side stitch. Well, it's actually for about anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute before. And what should happen with activity is our CO2 should continue to increase. All right, it's sort of the same thing as saying lactic acid builds up. All right, CO2 is a big part of lactic acid. Lactic acid builds up as we do activity. So our bodies really actually sort of become a little more acidic. All right, that creates that window where anything that's holding on to oxygen will let it go into tissue that needs it. But we see something really wonky happen in people who get side stitches, and that's that the whole thing reverses. And the only thing we can explain that by, or I should say the thing that makes the most sense to me of why that's happening, is it's sort of an anticipatory thing. We don't see it in novice runners that much. All right, we'll see it in people who run a lot, or elite college runners, or we've had a couple Nike runners that we've even worked with this on. where we'll see this drop. And again, what I assume it is this sort of anticipation. Their mind knows what's coming, their body knows what's coming, and it overreacts. So it doesn't actually stay dialed into the present need. It's anticipating something, it's working off of a story of something that happened before, but it's not actually staying in the present moment to adjust based on what the actual chemical demands are. And I think it's probably true of most all breathing dysfunction. We could probably boil it down into one of two things, which equates to really just one thing, and that's, barring no heart and lung dysfunction, if you have breathing dysfunction, it's likely because your body, your mind, everything in between is living off of a story from the past or anticipating something to come in the future. How's that for crazy? So everything that we do in terms of the breathing practice has one central goal, and that's to actually just connect you to the moment. So we pick the pattern work, and now we'll get to those questions around the patterning. We pick the pattern work, hopefully not to create panic, but really as a way just to connect you to what's happening right now. So don't build too much into the pattern work. In other words, it is not actually how we want people breathing, this 3-2-4 pattern. It's just a moment in time where we give you something to focus on that's happening right now. Most of us, if we're out for a run or doing any kind of activity, our mind is spending a majority of the time thinking about what happened earlier or what's going to happen next in the day and a little bit of what's actually happening. So the beauty of doing this pattern work is to actually just connect you to what's happening right now. Now also, that 3-2-4 pattern will build up CO2 levels a bit. All right, I think that happens just because we're having you hold your breath a little longer than what you normally would. So we get that kind of chemical shift where we build up a little extra CO2 in the system, which just makes hemoglobin really happy to let go of oxygen. Okay. The instructions that I gave you last time and that I'll give you again this time, I think the recommendation was a breath in for 3, a hold for 2, and then a breath out for 4. Doing it for 2 minutes. All right, so we pick a small period of time because we don't want to build CO2 up too far. If we do that, then we'll negate any, essentially we'll bring you into a more stressed out state with running than what you physically, deserve to be in at that point. And just the reverse happens if CO2 drops. So we keep it in just a short little bit of time as a way for you to connect to that moment with it. Now I can tell you that when I do it myself, I'm doing it for 10 to 20 minutes. All right, but I started out on that smaller. So it is okay if you really find you like it and you feel good with it to take it further. The elite runners that we've worked with have ended up not just doing it through entire workouts, but actually do it as they run. All right, I don't know if I really recommend that yet. It sort of takes it a little bit outside of the scope of what the intention is, all right, which is again, connect you to the moment and to build CO2 up just a little bit on your behalf. So we'll take time and we'll practice that just in a walk. And then I've got one other exercise, one other activity that falls in this same idea of getting breath mechanics how we like and also as a way to connect you in the moment. So let's do a short walk. And so the walk will be, just to review, 3 steps for a breath in, 2 steps for a breath hold, and then 4 steps to breathe out. And if you know already that you like a different pattern, go for it. The pattern is not that sacred, it just is what works for most people. All right? So feel free to do your hold at the end of your exhale if you'd like. Okay? Yeah, great.
If I could just interject really quick. Just for, it may apply, you can play around with it when you're doing it. For myself personally, the 3, 2, like the counting that much was a little distracting. It was easier for me to just say 1, 2, 3, and then count 4, 5 for the hold. And then 1, 2, 3, 4 for the out breath. So it's the same pattern, but it just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4 was an easier counting for me to do the same pattern. And that may be for you or may not be for you, but I found that really helpful. It was less segments of numbers.
Excellent. I like it. So.
With walking, are you timing your count to the steps, or are you just counting at whatever pace feels it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the question was, are you associating your timing with the steps, or are you just counting? And either one is okay. All right, so it isn't meant to be like time. All right, there is no constant with it. We're just trying to build a ratio and really just have you think about it. Most people, I think, do it to the steps. So can we take 2 minutes to do that? 2 minutes and we'll come back. Ready, go. All right, let's debrief that a little bit. Any thoughts on that? How'd it go?
I think something that was really kind of, this felt strange, like finding the pace of my steps to figure out the speed of my breath that actually felt like a comfortable length of breath. Just kind of.
So you had a little conversation between your breathing and your step.
Yeah, like I did Qigong for a while. It was like really, it's like finding that exact pattern that works.
Yeah, yeah, and so that's a great point. I mean, what he's saying is he kind of had to listen to how much he wanted to breathe and how fast he wanted to walk and have a little conversation of compromise to get to what was working for both. And when you're running, what you may have to do is pick different patterns because you may be trying to run at a certain pace, so then you'll play with your pattern work to adjust accordingly. It's a weird thing to do. Breathing is an autonomic function, and it's very bizarre that we actually have conscious control over an autonomic function, right? Which is really where the magic lies, that we've got this thing that will, if we actually get out of the way, it will do its best job. It gets mucked up because we essentially get in the way of it. And now we're asking you to get in the way of it even more and be really conscious around it. And just to put some of your hearts and minds at ease, there is not actually one breath rate that works best for us. In fact, we should all be able to regulate in a bandwidth of about 4 breaths per minute to 20 breaths per minute. So even if this pattern that you're picking to use isn't the exact optimal rate for you at that moment in time, you actually have got a pretty big margin of error that your body will do very well with. Okay? Did anybody get that panic feeling that they got with running with it? Okay, good, good.
I had an insight into that though. I think that trying to breathe out for 4 is the thing that doesn't work for me. And if I actually just breathe out for 2 and then hold for 2 and otherwise do the same breathing pattern, it's fine.
Yeah.
So I think I'm blowing off too much carbon dioxide when I'm trying to do that pattern, even though I'm trying to slow down my out breath.
Yeah, and that's really common. When we hook people up to the Capno trainer, we're able to see this a whole lot more. But what we tend to do with our exhale is essentially crash through that beginning phase of it. So another thing that you can practice is actually savoring that beginning part of the exhale. In other words, not just crashing through it so that by the end of 4 seconds or the end of 8 or 15, whatever we're doing with people, that you're not struggling at the end of it. So you really just kind of savor.
No struggle.
So you're not struggling at the end of the 4 count. Yes. Welcome to humanity. That is exactly the feeling that everybody gets with it. And so if you're getting that, there's your cue that you're probably crashing through that beginning part of the exhale. So hold it back a little bit, kind of enjoy it, feel it. All right, feel just that beginning part and then let it be what it wants after that. Just that 1 second of being a little bit different with the exhale will make a big difference in what it feels like in that tail end. Yeah, great, great. So again, there's nothing sacred about that pattern. All right, it's just the fact that you are playing with a pattern to elevate your consciousness around breathing. And then doing that kind of work we know elevates CO2 a little bit. So if you know you have a history of either side stitches or anxiety, anything that would indicate CO2 being low, muscle tension, you could try that as a way to just see if you can get ahead a little bit on the CO2 ratio. All right, one last activity around this. And what we'll do is we'll pick a static position that is somewhat compromising, okay? In other words, not very compromising, just a little bit more compromising than standing still. And the reason is we want just there to be a little bit of a challenge into your system that's gonna make your body want to fall into the universal pattern of anxiety breathing. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah, so we start to breathe up here and we compress back here. Okay, so as simple as raising arms up overhead. What that'll do is if we're not keeping our body in check and if our body's not being really smart, we'll all tend to compress through here and we'll elevate our breathing up to here. So let's try that. Arms go up overhead, palms face towards each other, fingers are extended into the universe. All right, so in other words, your arms are committed to being up, they're not just hanging there. And with this, every time you take a breath in, imagine that whole ring that the diaphragm attaches to, that whole lower rib cage expands in every direction. It's very subtle, don't make it too pronounced, but as you take a breath in, feel that you can expand that area. And then as you breathe out, you'll find a little bit of length from your heels to your fingertips. So instead of breathing out and kind of collapsing, as you breathe out, you're going to find a little bit of length from your heels to your fingertips. So the breath in is feeling how the universe can support you, feeling that rib cage expand in all directions, the lower rib cage, and that breath out is extending back into the universe, heels to fingertips. Great. And then arms down and come on in a little bit. Any thoughts on that? Does it feel intuitive once you do it? Or does it feel really kind of strange and counterintuitive?
I'm glad I don't run like that.
Yeah, we won't ask you to do that. I mean, you could.
Actually, that's what I learned as a child as a remedy for side stitches while running, was to run with your arms up above your head.
Interesting. To get side stitches, try it. I'm not sure why it works, but do any of you do yoga? Yeah, so, I mean, all yoga asana are that great opportunity to work on that visualization with breathing, so that as you breathe in, you really feel yourself expand, or think of it as just really supporting the pose that you're in, and then as you breathe out, you find length. It's a really powerful breathing practice to use all day long. If there's one that you would take with you all day long, this is it. All right, it's that breathing in and just feeling yourself expand in the lower rib cage, and breathing out, finding integrity in whatever pose you're in, whether you're sitting in the car, standing at a counter, standing in line at the grocery store, but it's finding that length with the exhale. There is a part of surrender that comes with the exhale too. So we don't think of the exhale as being this total tightening up your system. If you had to visualize it, you would think the kind of inner core, your innermost framework actually finds length, while everything on the outside melts down. So play with that image. It really is about getting efficient in whatever pose you're in. So we've got this kind of equal engaging while we're letting go of something else. And the breathing in is what gives you kind of the wisdom and the energy to do that, to let go of what you don't need and to hold on to what you want. Questions?
I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
When I breathe, I get like, even I'm doing deep breathing, get like a tightness in my upper chest. Like, feels almost like it's like holding air or something. Almost like it's like a balloon that's filling up.
If you do deep breathing?
Deep breathing, yeah.
And is that a good feeling or not feeling you don't
feel
like?
Good. It's like a pressure, and it feels like it's kind of getting in the way of breathing almost.
Yeah. So, we have this overarching theme that there are times when our body feels like it needs more oxygen, and then what we do is we breathe more, only for it to make us feel worse. A lot of times that's exactly what deep breathing is. So when you're anxious and you've got this dialogue running in your head that somebody told you should take 10 deep breaths, and you do that and you don't feel great with it, what you've likely just done is you've taken yourself from a hypocapnic state where your CO2 is already low. Now you've done big breathing and you've dropped your CO2 even lower. At this point now, your brain isn't getting enough oxygen to really be able to concentrate like it should. All muscle tension in your body is increased, and it's probably some of what you're feeling. So knowing that, if you had that feeling like you want to take deep breaths, how would you adjust it? Ideas from anyone?
Slow exhale.
Sure, yeah. Slow down the exhale. Like, savor that beginning part of the exhale. Just feel that exhale. That'd be one way to do it. We know by using the Capno trainer, there's many, many different ways to do it. And not all, in fact, only a few work for each person at one moment in time, unless you're pretty skilled at this. All right? So let's throw out some other ones on the table. Slowing down your exhale is one powerful one.
Breathing into a bag?
That is actually worse. If worse comes to worse, just pre-passing out, you breathe into a bag. Okay? We would love for bodies to learn how to do this without the bag. All right, but in the clinic, when we've got people that keep heading south, which can happen when you do this kind of work, as a last-ditch effort, we'll have them breathe into a bag. It elevates CO2, and sure enough, symptoms go away. Okay. Another thing we use in the clinic is we call it imaginary feather breathing. And we do the imaginary version because the actual version ends up being a little bit too extreme. All right, and the actual version really is just putting a finger on your upper lip, pretending it's a feather, settling, quieting your breathing enough that you're not moving the feather. For everybody, this will increase CO2 in a good way, but for a lot of people, it's too dramatic of a change too fast. So the imaginary version is hands down at your side. Imagine your finger being at your upper lip, and quiet your breathing to a place where you wouldn't be moving the feather. In doing this kind of work, if at any point you want to take a deep breath, you do it. All right, it probably is a correct signal from your body. So we're not trying to suppress what other signals come from your body. If you want to take a big breath while you're doing this, you do it. and then you go back to the practice. Great question. All right, if there's nothing else, then...
I have a question.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Is there a danger in, if you're kind of slowing your breathing down, being a little bit in that hypocapnic state when you're running, is there a danger in doing that too much? Or is your body going to kind of help regulate you?
Yeah. If you were to slow your breathing down so much, what we would see on the capnograph is CO2 elevating, 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 which is the same thing as lactic acid building up in your body. So it will decrease performance. Okay. So yes, there's a window. That ideal window is 35 millimeters mercury pressure of CO2 up to 50. All right, that's not going to be very helpful for you when you're running. But the point is, just know it is not that we want CO2 to just keep escalating. More CO2, the better. It's not the case at all. So listen to your body. When your body says, okay, yeah, I'm starting to get dizzy and I'm not seeing well, either you are hypocapnic or hypercapnic. And we won't say that across the human population everybody should raise CO2, because people who breathe really well know they should just stay right where they're at. Ironically, those people, you can give them all kinds of wild activities to do around their breathing and they regulate and they stay steady. It's those of us who kind of struggle to get it right in most situations that when we start playing with it, we start getting dramatic changes that don't feel comfortable. But that idea of expanding as you breathe in this direction and then expanding this direction as you breathe out, I have no doubt, kind of tips everybody's chemistry in the right direction. Just doing it, that practice of being mindful of your breath, just to focus on something that connects you to the moment right now, across the board we can say that's beneficial. So we've been really careful to not say you should only breathe this much all the time. Not true at all. We should be varying the amount that we're breathing all day long based on the demands of what's going on. What we can say though is we would like your blood chemistry to stay steady throughout the process. These little tricks when life's not real threatening are the things that get us a little more skilled at regulating. And then when life is threatening, we should think about what's going on there and not our breathing. Get out of the way of the bus. Get up the hill. Yeah.
Dang mastodons all
yeah,
over the place.
Right. All right, well, thank you so much.
Great, that was awesome.
I love running. I love running. I love running. I love running.